Alafia ni Ashe Ray fam. It is Iya Funlayo here with you again on this Sunday where we are going to be talking about divination. Yes, yes, yes. I am seeing you coming in at Cabo Toya. How are you, sis? At Cabo Renee, Anisha, at Cabo. And I'm getting IG started right now. Hey, IG, you're live now too. This is Iya Funlayo here with our talk, second Sundays. Our talk about divination. Yes, yes, yes. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, what the different types are, and how you can get started, even if you have never done any type of divination before. Hey, Ekaro, Anisha, how you doing, darling? Good morning, IG. Everybody who's coming in on there. Spirit Game Strong. Ooh, I like that name. Yes, keep that Spirit Game Strong now. I like it. I like it. Yes, yes, yes. So, I like to jump right in and get started. If you are a little bit late, then you catch up in the replay. So, shout outs to all of you who are watching in the replay. So, what are we talking about today? We are talking about the practice of divination. And so I'm a professor. I got to start with definitions. What is divination to begin with? Divination is seeking information. Is really that simple. But as we can see from the fact that the source word divine is in there, it's seeking information from a divine source or from a source beyond the empirical, if we want to put it that way. So it's not necessarily a source it's not information in a source that you can touch with your hands or necessarily something that you see with your eyes, but it's something that you are accessing that's deeper within and that is connected to all of the divine universal powers that walk with all of us. And so when we perform divination, we are seeking to tap into those powers. Hey, Monica, Rev, how you doing? Latanya, good morning. Right? And so we are seeking to tap in, we are seeking to gain information. And so what is the purpose of divination? Well, the purpose of it is to gain information about our lives, but beyond that, right? Beyond that, because information that isn't applied is what's the purpose of it, right? There's no purpose to that. So the real purpose behind divination is to gain information that we can then enact or put into effect to make our lives better, right? Because hey, if something is not making your life better, then what is the point? Sister Maisha, good morning, right? What's the point of doing something that is not making your life better? And I say that all the time about spirituality. I'm like, listen, whatever you're involved in, whether it be Orisha, the church, if whatever it is that you're doing, if it's, voodoo, if it's hoodoo, whatever, if whatever you're doing is not making your life better, is not helping you along your path, is not making things better for you, then there's no point in doing it, right? That means that you got to do something different, because that is really what the point of getting involved in spirituality is. And the point of divination is gaining information that will help your life. In the Odus of Ifa-Orisa says that those who know, write this down. This is your quote for the day. This is the quote. I'm going to keep coming back to it. Those who know don't die like those who don't know. Say that again. Those who know don't die like those who don't know. Good morning, April, Tosh. Y'all heard that, Tasha? So it says that knowing is very important. But in order to not die, right, use that knowledge to not die, that means that the knowledge was used. It's not just that you know something, and that's what stops you from dying or having problems, right, which is encapsulated in death, which is considered the ultimate problem in Yoruba cosmology, right, where everything is seeking to push death away and avoid death and problems. Okay, so those who know don't die like those who don't know. It's that simple. Okay, so knowing is considered of high value. And so whenever we talk about Ifa, when you have divinations, you'll often hear stories told by your diviner that will tell you a problem that happened, that a person was advised to that a person received divination, right? And that they either followed the advice or they didn't, and what the outcome of the story was. Right, that's typically the form that an Ifa divination will take. Right, if you, and we'll go, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means for those of you who are really new. It's your first time, don't worry. But you getting divination and then performing the actions afterwards is what keeps us in that category of those who know, not dying like those who don't know. Right? And so, again, divination is intended to make your life better. It's intended to give you information. It's intended to give you ways to act. It's intended to give you things to do, rituals to enact, ways to shift your energy, places to go, places to not go, things to eat, things to not eat, things to do, things to not do, right? It is intended to affect and inspire your behavior. And again, I'm talking, this is from an African perspective, right? Because this is really from any perspective, and I'm going to go into what I mean by that, but particularly from an African perspective and from an Ifa-Orisa perspective, there's no such thing as information for information's sake. When divination is done, it is always with the intention of generating a ritual or some type of action that is going to be helpful to the individual in moving forward along their life path. Leticia, Keisha, good morning, Alafiani. Okay. Jackie, Yanifa, Ifashe Mora. Hello. Good morning, everybody. Hey, Shayla, how you doing, baby? Good morning. Okay. So to take a step back for those who are very new, again, divination is simply the seeking of information from a divine source using some type of means. And so the first divination tools that we have is our own bodies. Go ahead, touch yourself. This right here, yourself. This is a divination tool right here. Bat. First one, fly, especially right here, your solar plexus area, right underneath your chest. Right at the top of your ribs is where the at the bottom of your ribs, is where the seat of intuition is, right? So this right here, your body, first divination tool. When things go on that are oftentimes the vibes that we pick up the most, or the information that we pick up the most, is information that kind of disturbs us or is uncomfortable, right? So oftentimes the thing that we're first adept at picking up is those types of vibrations. So when we're fearful, right, or when something seems off, what do we feel? In our stomachs, we feel like, ooh, okay, we feel something, right? We feel like something's not right. Good morning, Charles, April, thank you, darling, right? We feel like something isn't right. And that is a form of divination. That's information that's coming to you. Now, it could be inspired by the environment, right? Of course, if you see something scary and you get scared, but sometimes you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, there's nothing to indicate from your senses that anything is going on, but you feel that feeling, right? And those of us who know about that, we like, oh yeah, nah, I'm not going, right? I feel that, I ain't going. That's me, right? But that's our first tool, our body, our ori, which is seated. Remember, if you remember from my last lecture, and if you haven't watched it, go back, look at the lecture on Iwa. The seats of our ori, our head and our stomach, right? These are the two places where we know things, okay? And so we feel that. When something's not right, we feel it. So that's the first form. And that's something that's natural. And y'all can at my Baba if you don't like it. He says that it's women. Divination, sisters, is women's enterprise. All of that seeking connection and information from the divine, that is women's stuff through and through. Doesn't mean that men don't do it, but we're supposed to do it. It happens for us naturally. That is why there is the whole saying about women's intuition, right? We are connected, and things, we are feeling things. Hey, what's up, Camille? She said, this happened last night when someone was trying to break in the house. I was just telling my mom the feeling of fear I had last night. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But yeah, see, when I know y'all all jujued up, and I know you be feeling stuff. I know you. I know how you, right? So when we feel those things, again, it's the information and the action. That's the important part that you always have to remember with all of this. It's not just the information. It's information and action, right? So if you feel now you're about to go somewhere and your natural intuition, your natural divination tool says something's wrong, and you don't let that affect your action, and then something goes down, you understand what I'm saying? So it's about information and action. Information and action. So my sister who says she, for her, felt like somebody was going to try to break in, she acted on that, right? And we act. It's about acting on those things. Good morning, Yulia, Erin, Yalode, Ekabo, Elisha, Yagbara. Good morning. Sweets by Kyle, 2True0310. Everybody, good morning to all of y'all, right? So information and action. That's what we're talking about when we're talking divination, specifically and particularly from an African perspective. So first tool is the body, right? Some people naturally, we all have the capacity, but some people are even more attuned to where they can pick up those messages just with their bodies, right? I've grown in that. I haven't always been as in tune in that way, but that's grown in me, right, over practice and over time. And oftentimes we may suppress that, right, because it can be scary to feel this information and then not know what to do with it, to get this information. And then it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? And so it's important to have guidance, right? That's why traditionally we would have guides and teachers who would tell us how and show us by their own actions how to work with this information that we get. Okay, so that's the first divination tool. Aside from the body, there are many, almost anything can be used as a divination tool depending on the system that you're talking about. Okay, and so like literally anything. Water is a divination tool, right? People have done what's called water gazing and looking into a bowl of water. We have crystals, right? Crystals can be divination tools. Pendulums, which are often made of crystals, are divination tools, and these all work in different ways. We have what's called cartomancy, right? So mancy is the divination is also, especially divination that uses tools. You often hear this ending of mancy. So you have cartomancy, which is cards. So tarot cards, playing cards, any type of card divination would fall under the category of cartomancy. You also have bibliomancy, which is divination by using books. So bibliomancy is when you maybe pray over a book and then open it, and whatever page you're on, you take a message from that, right? And people often do this with sacred texts, like the Bible, Quran. In a sense, the Ifa divination system, which I'll be talking about a little bit more extensively in a moment, is a form. It's not bibliomancy because it's not a book, but it is a form, it's a retrieval in the same kind of way where you're identifying a text or a passage that might be important to yourself or an individual that you're doing a reading for. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So a divination session, regardless of the tool, is typically colloquially referred to as a reading, right? So if you are going to get a session, you don't usually say, I'm going to get a divination session. You might say that if you fancy, right? If you fancy. But usually we say, I'm going to get a reading. And what that means is that the person, an individual who is skilled in using one or more tools will concentrate their energy on you in order to bring a message for you. So we can divine for ourselves, although I'm going to talk about why that's not always the best thing to do, but we can do it. And we can also divine for others. So people like myself who read and others who are here who do readings, Yalode, Fini, and others who do readings for other people. If you were to come to us for a reading, we would concentrate our energy on you, pray for you, right? Typically, this is how I do it. Not everybody, does it the same way, but I'm, talking about how I do things and how those who I'm familiar with do it, right? We say a prayer, we center our energy on you, and then we use whatever tool it might be to bring you a message. And so, as I said, cartomancy, cards, we have bibliomancy, which is with books. We have we have shells, the use of various types of shells. We have various types of bone divinations. We have, literally everything, all types of, we have obi, which I'll talk about in a minute, the kola nut. We have coconut divination, right? We have it using the meat and the shells. We have so many different types. And even within Ifa divination itself, you then have two types. You have divination using Ikin Ifa, which is the palm nuts. You have divination using Opele. Some people, there was even when I was looking into this, and I teach about this to my students as well when I'm teaching, college courses, there was even a new type of divination added to the lexicon called shuffleomancy, where it was putting your iPod or other device on shuffle and letting the song, right, that comes on be the message, right? So there's all of it is aimed at getting a message and using it to take action. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Krista. Good to see y'all this morning. Omololu Ekaro. Okay. And so, as I've said, many different types of tools. And this is information that's readily available if you look up divination, if you're interested in all the different types. So for our purposes, I'm going to focus in on a couple of types today that many people are familiar with, and also to answer a couple of questions about these various types of divination and how they intersect, how they work together, and things like that. And so I'm going to start off with the ever popular, since I started off with cartomancy, the ever popular tarot cards. So tarot cards the tarot cards as we know them today originate in about the 13th century in Europe. And initially, as several divination systems did, start off as what they say is a game, right? But really the game helps to help people gain information, but it was taken a little bit more lightheartedly as the stories go. But as it turns out, as people were playing this game, right, and getting this information, it was seen that oftentimes these things would come to pass, or the information on the cards would really hold information for the people who were playing. And so it shifted into being used in this way specifically for divination purposes. Okay, and so typically there are male tarot readers, but I would say the vast majority, 99.9%, both historically and now, are women. Again, divination, women's terrain, that intuition, that connection to water, fluidity, direct connections to the divine, all of those things have traditionally in almost every culture been considered women's domains, although that has shifted. And, that's a whole other story. And I'll talk about that a little bit as well, because we know that women's power has been suppressed, not only by Christianity, Islam, and other patriarchal religions, but also in our own Ifa-Orisa tradition as well. And there are a lot of historical reasons behind that. But traditionally, divination, women's thing, right? So with the tarot. And so tarot spread because it is one of the things about tarot that makes it very effective as a divination system is the fact that it's based on pictures, right? So the traditional tarot deck is called the Rider-Waite deck, and there are particular images that are on the cards that represent various archetypes. And so similarly to playing cards, there are 4 suits, and those 4 suits represent various aspects of life. So you have, and also the elements. So you have the suit of cups, which represents the element of water and speaks about our emotional states and things that are going on sort of beneath the surface within ourselves, our feelings. You have the suit of pentacles, which represents the element of earth, and which talks about money and other earthly, very grounded kind of material concerns typically. You have the suit of swords, which is with the element of air and speaks about our mental states and things that are going on in our minds, and sometimes mental difficulties, right, or things that may be going on. The swords for me is also, although there's this differentiation typically made between emotions and the mind, to me also intertwines with the emotions a lot. And then we have wands, which are also sometimes known as rods, which represent the element of fire and which talk about our creative energies and passions oftentimes, right? And so based on which cards come up as a person does readings, and there are many, many different ways. If you're interested in this, Google Tarot, about 1 billion things will come up. And I will drop in the link in the comments some good resources. But excuse me, when a person does a reading for you with using those cards, depending on the suit and the number that those that correspond, it will give you some information about what's going on in your life, what it might be advantageous for you to do and not to do. Okay, you also have within tarot, you actually have 2 groups of cards. So there's one group of cards that has the suits as I just described, and then that's called the minor arcana. And then there's another set of cards within the same deck that are called the major arcana, which are archetypal cards. And so you have energies like judgment and the world and the sun, which represent, again, these archetypal universal energies. And again, you can look this up. I'm not going to go so much into detail right now with that. But the point being that tarot is a system that has developed and become extremely popular throughout the world, and it's really actually seeing a big resurgence along with astrology, which I know many of us are into in terms of and that's also astrological divination is another form of divination, right? And we're often into our signs. Shout out Virgo Nation. But right, so that is one form of divination. Now, within the Ifa-Orisa tradition, right, within an African spirituality is very much known for divination. There's no African spiritual system that does not have some type of divination form, and usually multiple. And the Ifa-Orisa system is one that follows that. And so there are 3 primary divination systems that are used in Ifa-Orisa practice. Okay, the first and most common divination system is called Obi divination. Obi divination is performed using what is called a kola nut. The kola nut. Oh, you know what? I should have. Hold on. I'm coming. I'm bringing one to show you. I will bring it to show you. Stand by. I'm coming. Oh, I'm coming. Shout out to the Alaje Market where I just got my shipment of kola. The nuts, they say that it is kola obini beku, obini be arun, obini be nkankan burukulaye. So the kola nut, this is what it looks like. Right, it has 4. The ones that we use for divination have 4 lobes, so it's segmented in the way an orange is naturally segmented, right? And the ones that we use for divination have 4 lobes. We open them, we say certain prayers, there's a whole process to it. You open it, you throw it, and depending on how they land, right, we get a message from that. And that is the most common form of divination. There's another form of divination in the diaspora that is also referred to as Obi, but which instead of using this, uses 4 pieces of coconut meat, which are brown on one side and white on the other side, right? If you've seen, of course, a piece of coconut meat. And coconut in Yoruba is actually called agbon, but the genius of our ancestors, right, when they got into the diaspora and began using coconut in the place of, well, actually, let me take a step back, because the narrative is typically that they started using coconut when they got here. But one of the things I'm going to talk about in my forthcoming book, which is about Obi, is the fact that coconut actually was used in Nigeria as well, but it wasn't used as widely. So someone who came with that knowledge of using coconut made that the more widespread thing, because kola nut was no longer available here in the diaspora. It only grows really in Southwest Nigeria. It was cultivated a bit in Trinidad and Jamaica. Jamaicans may know it as busy nut, right? It has caffeine in it. It is, if you eat it, it actually gives you energy, right? It has caffeine in it. And it was one of the original ingredients, as I'm going to talk about in my book, of Coca-Cola. So coca leaves and cola nut. That is where the name comes from. So the term cola comes from this nut. Okay, in terms of soda, right? It comes from this nut. And yes, key French, I will share the market link. Right, cola nut, and so coconut is also used. So either cola nut or coconut, those are the 2 most commonly used forms of divination in Ifa-Orisa practice. Pretty much any ritual that you're going to do, you're going to use one of those 2 items in order to assess the satisfaction of the Orisha with whatever offering you're giving them, prayers, whatever you're doing, you ask them if they're satisfied, right? Just like, you assess your people. If you give somebody something to eat, you will kind of watch them and you see how they react. Oh, is it good? Okay, right? That's what we use our Obi for. We don't just give them stuff and then walk away. We ask them if they're satisfied with it, right? So Obi divination. We also have what is called Merindinlogun or Erindinlogun, which means 16 in Yoruba. And that is divination system using 16 cowrie shells. Okay, that system is said to have been introduced or given to Oshun by Orunmila. There's a story that Orunmila and Oshun were married, and that Orunmila was doing his Ifa divination, which I'll talk about in a moment, and which I've talked about in previous videos, so check them out, for clients, and that he went away and gave Oshun the cowrie shells to divine with for clients in his absence, and that she became so good at it that, she then had her own clientele and people coming to see her, and all of that. And so the cowrie shell system is one that is still in use. Again, typically much, much more common to see women using that form of divination, and also priests of various Orisha, who men and women can do it, but it's more common, and traditionally was much more common for women to do it. And so again, I'm not going to go too much into detail with these, but I just want you to know what these different forms of divination are, and at later times I'll go a little bit more into detail, right? So we have Obi, we have Merindinlogun, and finally we have Ifa divination, which is actually, as I mentioned, has 2 forms. And so there is the form, just as I mentioned, Ifa, one of the custodians of Ifa, one of the great Babalawos comes into the room. Hello, sir. Aboye. Yes. So when we do Ifa divination, we can either use what's called Ikinifa, or we can use Opele, right? Ikinifa are palm nuts. And they are, of course, the palm nuts that would be used for divination are ones that are specifically consecrated for that purpose. And then Opele is what's called a divining chain. And so it will look like a chain, and it has 4 pieces of Opele seed on each side for a total of 8. And so it's made such that when you throw it down, you'll get a signature where the seeds are free, where they can flip over. And so you might get, 2 down, 2 up on one side, and 1 up, 2 down, 1 up on the other side, and you read to see which ones have gone up and down. And so that gives you a signature. So regardless of whether you use the Ikin or the Opele, ultimately what you end up with is a signature, or what we call a signature of Ifa. And based on that signature, again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, so go back if you were late, it helps you to retrieve a set of verses, right? And this is so interesting. There's a whole set of literature out there about how this relates to actually computer technology, because when we think about an index, Ifa being an index that allows us to go and retrieve information. And so in order to be a proficient diviner in Ifa, or in any of these systems really, but I'll talk about Ifa for one moment, a proficient diviner is expected to memorize at least 8 verses of each of the 256 Odu. So think about, how much that would be, right? Go ahead and do that calculation real quick. So that whatever signature comes out, they will be able to retrieve stories from that Odu to relay to the client, and information from that Odu, which will include stories, which will include medicines, which will include actions, right? Remember, we said that this divination thing is about action, right? It's about action. It's about information that leads us to action. So that's one of the unique things about Ifa divination, and one of the things that makes Ifa such a powerful divination system is that the action is built into the system, right? When you get an Ifa divination, there is ebo, or spiritual action, that is already indicated along with the information. It's not some, so and then the diviner would check to see which particular rituals apply to you in that particular moment, or if any of them apply to you at that moment. But there already are associated rituals with each piece of information. So that makes it a very, very powerful system. Same thing with the Merindinogun system, right? So those 3 systems are the systems that are specifically related to Ifa-Orisa practice, okay? And so I want you to know, again, because I'm always about information, if somebody says they're doing an Ifa reading for you, and they don't either take out that chain that I just talked about, or the 16 palm nuts, they're not doing an Ifa reading. They're doing something else. Doesn't mean there's something wrong, but it's wrong if they're telling you they're doing one thing and they're doing something else. So just know that that's what that's supposed to be. If somebody tells you they're doing a Dinlogun reading, and they should be taking out cowrie shells, 16 of them to be precise. If they say they're reading Obi, they should be reading kola nut or coconut, right? Those are the 2 items. And so just so that we understand what it is within our particular practice. Now, to address a question that is asked very frequently, what, if any, is the connection between the first system I mentioned, tarot cards, and Orisha practice? And is there any connection there? The answer is yes and no, right? I'm going to start with the no first, because the no is more important in a sense. Well, not really. I won't say it's more important. They're equally important, really. Let me start with the no. The no is that because, as I said, tarot cards in particular, as a specific in the way that we know them now, developed in 13th century Europe, they're not historically connected to Ifa-Orisa practice in any way, right? Historically, culturally, they are not connected in that way. So they're not a part of Ifa-Orisa practice, or, they're not connected in that sense. When I say yes, there's a connection, I mean it in the sense that divination, as we said, is connecting with the divine for the purpose of gaining information. And so ultimately, all divination tools are tapping into the same source. They're all tapping into Olodumare. They're all tapping into the universal spirit. They're tapping into Allah. They're tapping into these energies that provide information, right? So is it possible that if someone is also, and if someone like myself, and I'll speak about myself specifically because, as many of you know, I am an Orisha priestess, but for the public, I read tarot, right? There's two reasons for that. First of all, tarot, I am very much experienced with it and have been reading since I was a teenager. And so you always, if you want somebody who's skilled with their tool, right? That's the tool that I'm the most skilled with. And so that's the one that I'm the most comfortable sharing with others, right? That's one very simple reason. But also for me, and because I'm also an Orisha priestess, right? Because I've been initiated to Orisha, Orisha speaks to me through everything, right? They speak to me through every kind of sign that there is, including through my cards, right? There are certain things that they can show me through the cards because I have a relationship with them separately as well, right? And so that's the thing. If you are someone who is connected to certain spirits, those spirits may speak to you through any means. People who are, for instance, initiated into Vodou, they use playing cards, right, for their divination. There are those who use bones for divination. There are all kinds of things that the diviner, right? So now we're coming to the individual is able to use when they have a particular connection. That doesn't mean that the tool they're using naturally or inherently has a connection to their spiritual system because they happen to be able to reference it, right? And so that's why I'm very careful with that, so that people understand that tarot cards are not done in Orisha practice. And if I'm doing an initiation or doing any kind of Orisha work, I'm not going to be using tarot cards in that work. I'm going to be using Obi, Denugu, Ifa in that work. But if you're coming to me for information, right, which is what most people come for, then I can use those cards and I can also tap into the connection that I have to Orisha, whereby they're able to speak to me that way. Right? Doesn't mean everybody's able to do that. And it also doesn't mean that it should be implied that there is some natural connection between them or that tarot is a part of Orisha practice or anything like that, right? So that's why I want to clarify that, because that question has come up quite a lot. And it also has come up in terms of chakras and things like that. Again, historically speaking, culturally speaking, no, chakras are not a part of Orisha practice, right? Chakras come from India. They are from the Ayurvedic system, right? It's a different system. But we have the same types of things in our system, right? Where we know that Ori, right? Those are two, what would correlate to chakras, would correlate to the crown chakra and correlate to the solar plexus. We have energies that correlate to every other energy, right? The third eye would correlate to Orunmila and Olokun, those deep seers, that knowledge, right? That energy, the universal archetypes is what we're talking about. So it's important to be nuanced when we're talking about these things. And when people, that's why I'm not, if you know me, I'm not super dogmatic. I'm about universal spirit. And that doesn't mean hodgepodging everything together and not understanding where things come from. It's respecting each thing in its individuality, as well as understanding that they are all tapping into the same force. Krista says, yeah, I am seeing tarot readers say they can determine someone's tutelary Orisha with their cards. That bothers me because these people Oh yeah, well now that's wrong. Exactly. Like based on what I just said, that's wrong. And these people aren't even Olarisha. Okay. Please don't tell me that. Please don't let me catch nobody in these streets. Number one, who's not in Olarisha saying they can determine who your Orisha is, Buzz. And number two, stop, please, people. And this is why I do these talks, because I don't want anybody getting caught out here by people. Unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people in every system of every practice on the face of this earth. Doesn't matter what it is. And so we have to know what it's supposed to be so that we don't get, that's crazy. No, like that's dead wrong. I have a huge problem with that. That's terrible. It's horrible. It's wrong. It's unethical. It's every piece of bit of wrong that it could possibly be. Okay, so again, and I talked about this. Go back and watch my videos. I don't be remembering which ones but I've talked about this before in terms of making sure the first thing, right? First divination tool is our Oris. Heaven, if something don't seem right or it doesn't seem to make sense, it's probably not right. Right? And it doesn't mean, like, oftentimes if you're new to something, of course, you're not going to know what's going on in detail, but you know when something don't feel like, something about this doesn't feel right, right? And so always, as we say in the hood, trust but verify, right? Like I hear you, right? That's why that's the Harlem, like that look right there is like, I hear you, but I'm gonna keep that little skepticism. That little up is like the skepticism, right? Keep that skepticism. Ask people about themselves. Ask for references. Ask other people, right? Don't try to do stuff in secrecy. That's something that I find happens too much. People, we unfortunately, for many of us, the only things that we have been taught about African spirituality is that it's somehow scary and secretive. And so we feel like when we're getting involved in it, we can't tell anybody and everything's got to be a secret. And that's nonsense. It's nonsense. You still have to verify stuff. If you meet somebody and you're going to work with them, you need to ask them who else they know, who else they work with. Look at their page. If it's somebody that you meet on social media, look who they're interacting with. Watch videos of them, right? I tell people that even about me. I'm like, look, ask about me. Ask other people about me. Don't ask me. Ask other people about me. Look at my videos. Look at who I associate with. And after you see all of that, then make a determination a little bit, right? Because you still don't know a person based on that, but you can at least begin to say, okay, I see she always talks about her teachers. That's good. That means she's learning from elders. I see that she's spoken here and there. Okay, that means I see she has, and not to say that a person has to have degrees or anything, so don't take me as saying this. I'm just saying about myself. If a person is looking at me, they can say, okay, she has this. Okay, all right. So that still doesn't mean that I'm great or that, anything like that, but it means you got at least a little bit of information about me to be able to say, all right, remember, information and action, information and action. And again, here's the other thing. If we find you don't, as they say, just because you've made a mistake for a long time doesn't mean you have to keep making it, right? So if you do find that you've gone down the wrong path, or you've gotten with somebody who ain't who all that they're cracked up to be, or any of that, stop, right? Turn around immediately, not tomorrow, not like, oh, let me see, I need to ease out of it. No, because this person is literally messing with your life, right? Somebody's absolutely messing with your life. When we're talking about divination, if you're talking about it in the real deal sense, especially in that African sense, people are tapping into your destiny, your life path. They're able to, if you're acting, that's the reason why divination can be dangerous, right? If it's not done by people with high morals, integrity, and who know what they're doing. Because if you're acting based on information that you're being given and that information is not right or is intentionally misleading you, that's like the highest crime that a diviner can commit, right? Ever. is intentionally misleading a client. That's against the laws of Ifa, is giving false information or speaking on something that you don't have knowledge of, right? So that's high crime. So these people Krista mentioned who are being crazy, saying that they can read people's Orisha with tarot cards, they playing with stuff they don't even understand, right? That's like high crime for a diviner to speak on something that they don't know about like that. And I just pray again, that's why I do these videos, so that everybody will get all of the information that they need to be able to move through all of this with integrity and with getting what they need, you know, and not getting swindled. That makes my blood boil. Like, I'm such a person, I don't see how people sleep at night on the real. Like, if I do any little thing wrong, I'm like, ooh, like my stomach's in knots, like the way my integrity's set up, I just can't, you know, and I don't get it. But that's, you know, it's not for me to understand. It's not for me to understand. But the point being that I don't want none of y'all to have those issues. So I want you to understand. Somebody asked, what about palm reading? Palm reading is another form of divination, not connected to Orisha practice, if that's what you're asking specifically, but it's another form of divination. So many different forms. Some people can look at your tongue and read the bumps on your tongue. I mean, there's all kinds of forms of divination out there. And so I would say as well, for those of you who are curious, don't be constrained just because you might happen to be an Orisha practitioner or into Orisha or what have you. Don't feel like you have to be constrained by that and only learn Din Lagoon or only learn Obi or only learn this or that. As I've talked about before, my very first divination tool was runes, right? I learned that when I was a teenager, and when I first started out with earth-based spirituality, I started out in Wicca, right? Because that was what was available to me growing up in New York City and being around a lot of sort of alternative, punky white teenagers. That's what they were, you know, that's what I was exposed to, and it gave me that first entry to come into earth-based spirituality, and then eventually saying, wait a minute now, okay, this is cool, but what did my ancestors do? What's my stuff, right? And it still took long for me to find information, which is a part of why I do what I do now, and you know what led me to that. But absolutely, all different types of divination, as I mentioned, finding information, acting on that information. Millie asked, go back to why we should be cautious when reading ourselves. Oh, yes. Asking because tarot card readings seem to be done for self often with people. Yes. Let me talk about that for just a moment as we get ready to wind down. And if you have any questions, pop them in there right now, because I'm going to be winding down in a few minutes. I'll take some time to answer your questions after I talk about this point. So, divining for ourselves. Why is that a thing, or why is it not a thing? It is a thing. Let's start and say there's nothing, quote unquote, wrong with a person divining for themselves, right? And we often do divine for ourselves, like when we do our Ose, when we pay homage to the Orisha and throw coconut for those of us who are all Orisha. And especially here in the West. I mean, let's start with the fact that culturally, right, if we're talking about Yoruba culture, being alone wasn't really a thing. You know what I'm saying? So let's start there. When we talk about divining for ourselves, for the most part, you really wouldn't have had a reason to need to divine for yourself, because there was always going to be someone else there who could divine for you. And it's always thought to be better to have someone else divine for you. Why is that? Well, the simple reason, and again, our ancestors were so brilliant and understand human nature very well. Let me tell you the simplest reason. It's because we like to lie to ourselves. It's that simple. We lie to ourselves all the time, every day, right? And so it's very different for you to read yourself and say, okay, yeah, this is what this says. And yeah, you know, you're in your own head. It's sort of like proofreading your own writing. You know what you were trying to say. So even if it's not quite clear or there's a typo or there's a mistake or whatever, you skip over it, right? You're reading it and you're reading what you think you wanted to say or what you know you wanted to say, right? Instead of what's actually there on the page. And so that's the very simplest reason, is so that another person who's not you can look at the information and give you the real deal. And again, that's why it's important to have a diviner who's A, skilled, and who B, has integrity, right? Who's skilled, who has integrity, right? In order to, and who also has the courage to tell you the real deal, right? About what's going on. People call me and get dragged all the time. I drag you nice. I'm nice about it. But I'll tell you, look, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And you thinking that is very different from someone else telling you that and seeing it and pointing it out and saying, listen, this says that you messing up and you need to do better, period, right? It's not the same when you just think, yeah, I'm messing up, I need to do better, right? It's different when someone else tells you, Camille fainted, Lord have mercy, I'm telling you. Look, people don't want to accept that about themselves, but that's what we do. We lie, we downplay, and so I would say that for, I pull cards for myself at times, just to kind of check on things. And I would say for low key day-to-day informational purposes, which people are typically using Obi and tarot cards for, that's okay, just to kind of get a vibration or see what's up. But when you really need to look into things, and when you're really looking to get that information that you're going to act on to make whatever change needs to be made, you can't do that kind of reading for yourself. Ifa readings, I would say, should basically not ever, as far as Ifa is concerned, shouldn't be done for yourself. Someone else has to do that at Bo. It's also a cycle, right? It helps to reinvigorate the community when we do these things for each other. And so traditionally, that was a part of our job and our responsibility to each other as a community, to do these things for each other. So in a given community, every other person would have known how to divine, right? So they could, even if it was just throwing Obi. And the other thing is that in instances where people were divining for themselves, other people were there to witness, right? So even then, that makes it less likely that you're going to interpret your message in a way that is self-delusional if somebody is there witnessing it with you, right? So all of these things, again, our ancestors are brilliant, right? Don't think that they were just, when we think about spiritual systems, that's why people often say, and it's true, Ifa-Orisa is not just about religion, spirit. No religion is just about religion and spirit. It's all about psychology, it's sociology, it's history, it's everything that taps into who we are as human beings. Go ahead and hit those hearts if that blows your mind, because I love it. It always blows my mind when I think about really all the details, all the brilliance that our ancestors had, and the way that they understood human nature, the way that they understood how people operate, the way they understood how our minds and our spirits operate, right? Very, very, very important and interesting. Let's see. Can you speak on getting divination too often and the frequency with which we can get divination? That is a good question. Let us remember that the first divination tools are what? If you are using divination in place of making decisions for yourself, you're doing it too much, right? So that's one way to know. If it feels like you can't make any decision whatsoever about anything, and especially frivolous things, or things that, let me not say frivolous, but that are semi-inconsequential, then it's too much, right? Divination is really for information about important things in your life. And it's not to say that you can't divine on those things that are less important, I guess, but really it's at moments where you're ready to take action, right? And so typically I don't recommend more than every 3 months, because that's, and well, let me stop for a moment. There are certain types of divination that are designed to be done more frequently. So for example, Obi divination, those of us who have Orisha, we will throw Obi to our Orisha multiple times in a week, depending on how many Orisha you have. You might be throwing Obi every day. So that, and that is more to maintain the relationship. It's feeding them, it's maintaining the relationship. It's that day-to-day check-in of, hey, how you doing? Oh, we're good. Oh, here, here's something to look into. Sometimes that divination will tell you that you need a more intense and deeper divination. So it really depends on where you're at with things, but I would say generally speaking, for the average person, if you're not doing your cola for Orisha every day because you're initiated, getting readings too often can just make us too dependent and make it to where we feel like we can't make any decision or do anything without going to get a reading. And so I would be cautious about that. Like I said, typically recommend every 3 months, and beyond the reading, hello, somebody, do the rituals, do the rituals. So it's like when you go to the doctor, divination is a form of diagnosis, right? So when you go to a doctor, if they tell you this, and this is wrong, and here's what you need to do, you need medicine, you need surgery, you need this or that, that's really what you're going there for. You're not going there for the diagnosis, you're going for the treatment. And so the spiritual work is our treatment. So if you get these readings, and especially I'm talking to y'all who get reading after reading after reading after reading, especially if you're getting Ifa readings and not doing the rituals, you're wasting time and money. Okay? We'll just put it right like that. Time and money. And to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons that Ifa-Orisa led me to continue reading my tarot cards, because tarot cards don't generate Ebo in the same way that Ifa readings do. And a lot of the time when people come for readings, they come, they get the information, and then that's it. They don't do the ritual, right? So more important than getting the divination is doing the ritual, enacting the change. Because oftentimes, and especially I find that clients who come to me very frequently, the cards say almost the same thing every time, and then you get frustrated. But why is that? It's because you haven't even done the thing. When I say, okay, well, remember you got this last time? Did you do X, Y, and Z? And they say, well, no, I will. Then what's the point, right? The point is for this to spur us into action. If you don't take nothing else from this, remember the quote that I gave you at the beginning. Ifa says, those who know don't die like those who don't know. That's because they take what they know and they act on it, right? So if you're getting readings every other week and you are not doing anything that the readings tell you to do, you have not broken up with that person that they said break up with, you have not done the Ebo or the ritual, you have not done anything that they said to do, what you getting another reading for? There's no point, right? So that's very, very, very important. And so I would say if you're getting readings and if you're doing the ritual, I will almost guarantee that you'll find you don't need divination as frequently. IG, y'all are about to get cut off. I saw Sweet by Kale asked, for those who are seriously interested in Ifa, what are some things you could recommend for us to do before we seek initiation? Right now, I recommend that you go to facebook.com/AsheIray and watch my video about Ifa and the truth about initiation. and I answer all of those questions in that video, what you should do. But the short answer is just seek information, get to know practitioners, attend rituals, get as involved in the community as you can to see if it's even for you, right? Sometimes we think something's for us and it's not, right? Or it is, but not where we first encounter it. Maybe we have to encounter a few different people before we realize. And I'll say that about divination as well. Divination comes through relationship, right? Having a relationship with the diviner is important, and one that you trust. Traditionally, people relied on maybe one or two diviners. You didn't run from person to person to person to person. You didn't try to go with who's cheapest, because that doesn't necessarily mean they're the best. And that doesn't mean that if somebody is inexpensive, they're not good. But it means that if you're window shopping and just trying to find who's the cheapest, that's probably not going to land you in the best place. So make sure that, you're forming a relationship, that you're finding out about the person, that you are understanding who you're dealing with. Again, because this is your life. This is important, right? For people that have integrity, for people who care about other people, right? And who want to lead you and help you, not even lead you, but help you to lead yourself. That's really what a diviner is supposed to be doing, is leading you to help yourself, right? Leading you to do the things that you need to do for yourself, because the diviner is not going to be there when you are, going through whatever it is you're going through. It's going to be you. And so any good diviner, their point should be to help you to make the best decisions for yourself and to do the things that you need to do. Omiyale says, also the energetic recycle remains stable to a period of time, so getting readings too frequently can be counterproductive. Yes, exactly, as well as that. It takes time for things to cycle, right? So if you're getting a reading, if you get a reading and then you're getting another one, it could be reading the same energy. Even if you get different signs, you'll find that the messages are often similar. And I'll say this, very, very important. Don't get divination, especially if you've gotten a divination from somebody with integrity and all of that. What you don't want to do is try to go to another diviner hoping you're going to get a different answer to the same question. Right? People do that all the time. Well, they said, but I don't know if that's really. If you don't know if that's really the case, that means that you don't trust your diviner, in which case you shouldn't be working with them. But we are warned in using our divination systems not to ask the same question twice, and not to ask what you already know, right? So if you already know you don't want to do something, or you already know that you are going to do something regardless, don't get no reading asking if you should do it. Because if you get the reading and you're told not to do it and you still do it anyway, that's going to be worse energetically than not getting the reading at all. So just don't, right? When you are getting these readings and getting information, I encourage you to go into it with the mindset of action, right? Again, if you take nothing else from this today, I want you to take away from it the thought that action is what this is all about. It's not just about knowing something, because knowledge means nothing if we don't enact it. French said, wow, that's what kids asking. I am asking mom when dad already said no. Exactly. It's the same thing. Exactly. Trying to play both sides against the middle. And then who gets played? You, right? Because mom goes and says, oh, you asking dad now? Didn't I already said no. Like, now you're really not doing it and you want punishment, right? So, exactly. Thank you for that. Very good example, right? So that's what happens. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to we're going to let that marinate. We're going to let those things go deep into us. We're going to go ahead and, marinate on everything. Key French said, oh, yes, it's hard to see the picture when you're in the frame. Ooh, hello, somebody. Yes, I like that. Thank you for all your help today, sir. You just dropping the jewels. I like it. I like it. Yes. I thank you all so much for being with me today. I pray that you have learned, you've enjoyed, you've laughed. Please do, if you've learned something, please share this with others so that they are able to learn and grow. And definitely, if this is your first time being with me, come back because I hope you have fun, and check out the rest of the videos that I have in the video section here on Ashe Ray. Soon, I will tell you that soon the videos will be moving out of there and moving onto my site, shiny new site that's about to come. I'm so excited. And so things are going to be shifting a little bit, but I will still be doing these lives. Save the second Sunday at noon EST. That's our time together. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Be blessed, be well. And remember, those who know don't die like those who don't know. So go forth, get that knowledge, and act on it. Ashe, ashe, ashe.